every day you break down a couple things that pretty soon ESPN will be talking about the same thing Pete's talking about, folks. Trust me, because he used to broadcast there. I think somebody there is watching the Rebels Edge and picking up on what Pete's laying down. So go ahead, Pete.
It's this time of year, John, and we've gotten past the Super Bowl, right? I mean, we've had all that. They did fire the defensive coordinator of the 49ers. That was a bit of a surprise because if you look at his numbers were actually better for the defensive side of things than his predecessor. So it's kind of interesting to see, but there's obviously something behind the scenes that we don't know. I wanted to take a look at free agency, though, John, because, yeah, we've got the combine coming up, and we'll hit that in a second. But I think this free agency market, I wanted to do a top four, and we just watched one of them, Kansas City Chiefs, Chris Jones. He's 29 years old, defensive tackle, John, and right now he's probably the most wanted player, I think, in free agency. And he's going to get some real money, John, because he's projected to get a 3-year, $84 million contract. So $28 million a year would be where he'd be at. And he's 29 years old. And what I like about this is Chris Jones doesn't play like he's 29 years old. The guy plays like he's 24 years old, maybe 25 years old. So I think he's got 3 more years worth in the tank for him. And I think that's why people are so excited. When you watched him play, he was pretty amazing. And I'll throw this one out at you, John. Where would be the best landing spot? And I think I figured it out just kind of looking around and trying to figure out who's got the money, who doesn't, who's got a lot of rookies because they're going to have more money. Well, how about Houston? They've got their quarterback. They've got their linebacker. Why not put a defensive end down there that's going to be getting after the quarterback on top of your outside linebacker, who was the rookie of the year? That could be a really, really interesting landing spot. Then there's Kirk Cousins. You got Josh Allen. You got Antoine Winfield. I will say this, Josh Allen, not the quarterback, by the way. He's the edge rusher from Jacksonville. He is an absolute beast. He's going to get the franchise tag. Antoine Winfield, in my opinion, gets the franchise tag. It's not so bad, though, John. When your franchise tag is $16.5 million to $22.5 million, not so bad. I think that's right there with what's a fair number for these players and free agents.
Chris Jones, Pete, the guy that Pete was just talking about, folks, he is a beast, of course. He was a 5-star recruit out of high school. The kid is a monster. And if you remember, after San Francisco scored one of their touchdowns, he came to the sidelines and ripped his defense a new butt before Spagnuolo came over and said, all right, guys, calm down. Let's do this. Because he said, we're not doing it. And they weren't. They were making mistakes. Chris Jones was also the guy that on our video yesterday that we showed you.
Seems like nobody touched that guy, Pete.
It's kind of a problem when your right tackle doesn't block anybody.
Yeah, the right tackle for some reason slides to the outside, knowing that there is a guy directly in front of him.
Chris Jones was the guy that went unblocked when 68 from San Francisco, the offensive right tackle, just slid to the outside and gave him an unimpeded path to Purdy. Dumbest play of the game, Pete. Some people might say, well, the punt hitting that kid's ankle, that kid wasn't trying to be in the way. The kid was trying to block somebody so that his guy could return it. And every once in a while, that oblong ball makes a little bit of a different bounce, and it hit him. And the other kid should have just fallen on it, obviously, not tried to pick it up. In that instant, do you make the right decision? To your point, Pete, Chris Jones, beast. I would say, your buddy Harbaugh, depending what he does, Khalil Mack, I think you might see, if they got rid of Khalil Mack, I think you might see them go after Chris Jones pretty hard.
The last one, I'll just throw it out to you. Kirk Cousins. Does he come back to the Vikings? Maybe. Can they afford him? Probably not. Does he go to Pittsburgh, whose basically only thing that they're really lacking is a quarterback, John? Or does he go to Atlanta, where they've got pockets full of money and no quarterbacks that you can find? I'm starting to think more and more that he ends up in Atlanta, which would be a really big deal, I think, if Kirk Cousins was a quarterback in Atlanta, because they have a lot of pieces. They didn't show it, but they do have a lot of pieces. They got a hell of a running back as well.
And, Pete, it's a dome. So obviously half of his games are in a dome, and he's shown he's very comfortable playing in a dome. Not that he loses when he goes outside the dome. So he could be a Pittsburgh guy too, Pete. And he went to Boston College. So either way, both those schools or both those teams are East Coast, or at least I view Atlanta as East Coast, Pete.